In life, there are moments when nothing falls apart, and nothing explodes either. Things simply grow quiet. Libra may be feeling this more clearly than usual. Questions that once pressed on your mind no longer rush you forward. Choices that used to hold you in hesitation no longer feel as heavy as before. What remains is a very gentle pause, as if life itself is lowering its voice, slowing down just enough for you to hear what you often move past without noticing. In moments like this, not everyone realizes what they're standing in front of, but Libra senses it. This is not delay. It is a quiet intersection, where a choice begins to take shape from within. And before talking about which path to take, let's begin here, with the moment when everything slows down, the place where this story truly begins. In the life of a Libra, there are times when no major event is needed to create change. Nothing collapses, nothing erupts. It's just that the familiar rhythm begins to slow. Days that were once filled with thoughts, schedules, responsibilities, and expectations no longer press forward the way they used to. Not because you've given up, but because something within you has stopped forcing itself to move faster than what you truly feel. Libra stands in that moment with a very distinct sensation, not lost, but not fully clear either. Not confused, yet aware of being paused at a very quiet crossing. This intersection has no large signs. No one standing beside you telling you what is right or wrong. No pressure to answer immediately. Only a depth of stillness, enough for you to realize how long you've been moving without truly stopping to listen to yourself. Within that pause, Libra begins to notice subtle movements inside. Things that once required constant weighing no longer feel as heavy as before. The familiar questions, what keeps things harmonious? Will this decision upset someone? Are still present, but they no longer dominate your thoughts. In their place, another question appears, quieter, deeper. What do I need in order to live more honestly with myself? This slowing down is not here to make Libra feel weaker. It arrives to offer a necessary space, a place where you can look back on your path not with judgment, but with understanding. You begin to see how much time you've spent maintaining balance on the outside, keeping relationships smooth, keeping the atmosphere steady, making sure everyone feels comfortable. And along the way, you start to notice that some of your own desires have been set down so gently that even you barely realized it. This quiet crossroads does not appear to demand that you change everything. It simply opens a moment for one honest question. Does the balance you've been protecting still include you? When you're no longer pulled strongly in any direction, Libra begins to sense a very particular kind of freedom, not the freedom of action, but the freedom of being truthful with your own emotions. You may realize that you don't need to decide today. You don't need to explain everything right now. You don't need to prove that your choice makes sense to anyone else. All that's needed is to remain here a little longer, to listen to your own breath, to observe emotions as they pass without trying to correct or control them. For Libra, allowing life to slow is not a sign of hesitation. It is a form of maturity, an understanding that choices with depth are rarely born from urgency. This moment feels like late afternoon, when the light is no longer sharp, but hasn't fully faded. Edges soften, sounds seem more distant. And within that space, you begin to see more clearly the shape of the person you are becoming, not through anyone else's expectations, but through a very honest inner awareness. This quiet crossroads does not ask Libra to move forward right away. It simply invites you to stay long enough to realize that this slowing is not an empty pause. It is the beginning of a new way of choosing, gentler, more truthful, and closer to who you are than ever before. Libra has grown used to living in a space shaped by questions, not to doubt yourself, but to keep things in balance. Will this make the atmosphere feel heavier? Could that choice leave someone feeling left behind? If I step in a different direction, will the familiar balance begin to shift? Those questions have walked beside Libra for a long time. They've helped you see people with greater sensitivity. They've helped you stay connected. They've helped you become someone others easily trust and lean on. But at this quiet crossroads, those familiar questions begin to step back. They don't disappear. They simply make room. And in that space, another question emerges, lighter in tone, yet deeper in meaning. what truly feels right for me right now. This crossroads does not resemble a test. There is no right or wrong, no one waiting to judge your decision. It's more like a mirror placed gently in front of you. Nay, it offers no advice. It simply reflects what already exists. Within that reflection, Libra begins to see past choices differently, not to deny them, not to regret them, but to understand that every decision you once made was right for who you were at that moment. And yet, the person you are becoming is no longer the same. Your values have shifted in subtle ways. Your personal boundaries have grown clearer. What nourishes you no longer looks the way it once did. This crossroads appears to clarify that difference, not through warning, but through feeling, a sense that certain things no longer align with your inner rhythm, a small gap between what you've been maintaining and what you truly need. Libra begins to realize something important. Considering others is a beautiful quality, but forgetting yourself for too long can make balance fragile. This crossroads does not ask you to decide immediately. It simply invites you to be more honest about what's happening inside. The question is no longer, what should I do so everything looks okay? It becomes, what do I need in order to feel aligned? At this intersection, outside voices grow more distant. Familiar expectations soften. What remains is a very personal clarity. Some choices were held onto, not because they nourished you, but because you feared disturbing surface-level balance. And then, a new understanding begins to form. True balance is not about keeping everything still. Balance is allowing yourself to move while preserving respect for yourself and for others. This crossroads reflects something back to Libra. You were not wrong for choosing the way you once did, and you are not selfish for reconsidering now. Libra's growth is not found in always choosing the path that pleases everyone. It lives in recognizing when a choice no longer reflects who you are becoming. The crossroads remains. It does not push. It makes no promises. It is simply still enough for you to see yourself more clearly. And from that clarity, a gentle shift begins to take shape, one that rises from within, where future choices are guided by understanding rather than fear of losing balance. Libra has grown accustomed to finding answers through dialogue, through the look in someone else's eyes, through subtle feedback from the world around you. You listen, you adjust, you weigh things carefully, not because you lack conviction, but because you understand that truth often has many layers, and each person can only touch a part of it. But at this stage, the way you search for answers begins to shift, not because you've stopped caring about others, but because a small inner space has opened, a space where familiar outside voices no longer take up all your attention. Silence arrives like a very different kind of guide. It offers no advice. It asks for no belief. It simply stays. And in that presence, Libra begins to hear things that were once easily lost beneath expectations, responsibilities, and the desire to keep everyone comfortable. Within that pause, you start to realize that you've been holding on to certain things, not because they still nourish you, but because you fear that letting go would change the balance you've grown used to. You also see choices that were postponed, not because they were wrong, but because you wanted everything to appear harmonious in the eyes of others. You wanted to keep the overall picture undisturbed. Silence does not judge any of this. It simply places these truths gently in front of you so you can see them for yourself. And when you no longer feel the need to respond immediately, Libra begins to distinguish between two very different kinds of balance. One comes from constant compromise. The other comes from being honest with yourself. The difference is not found in words, it is felt. It's felt in the heaviness that appears when you continue choosing something that no longer fits who you are. And it's felt in the lightness that emerges when you allow yourself to consider a different direction, even without certainty. And silence helps you see that pleasing everyone is not always a sign of harmony. At times, it's a sign that your own needs have been placed too low on the list of priorities. And then, a very clear understanding begins to take shape. True balance is not about keeping everyone comfortable. Balance is when you no longer trade inner honesty for outer calm. Libra does not need to become harder in order to protect yourself. You only need to become more truthful. Silence does not demand an immediate decision. It simply creates enough space for you to stay with your feelings long enough. long enough that you stop avoiding what you've known for some time, but weren't ready to admit. You begin to see clearly that certain relationships, roles, and choices were deeply right in an earlier chapter of your life. They were not wrong. They just no longer reflect the person you are becoming. Recognizing this does not make you ungrateful, nor does it change who you are at your core. It simply shows that you are growing in a very quiet way. Silence carries answers, not because it says anything new, but because it gives you the chance to hear yourself again, without interruption, without direction. At this point, Libra understands something essential. You don't need to explain every feeling. You don't need to prove that the change inside you makes sense. You only need to know that you are no longer betraying yourself. From that moment on, balance begins to be redefined, not as stillness, but as alignment between what you think, what you feel, and what you are willing to move forward with. Silence remains, not filled with complete answers, just enough for you to realize that the next direction you take will no longer be guided by fear of losing balance, but by a desire to live more truthfully with your own values. And that is when a new chapter truly begins to open. After silence helps Libra see the inner movement more clearly, a question begins to surface with greater clarity. Not a question of right or wrong, but a question of alignment. What feels right for you at this stage does not arrive as an easy choice. It doesn't always feel safe, and it's not the familiar path you've already learned how to walk with confidence. What feels right often comes with a very honest hesitation. Not because you lack courage, but because you fully understand what you're weighing. Libra begins to notice that some choices, from the outside, look very stable. They're recognized. They're understood. They're seen as reasonable. Yet, when you stay with your own feelings long enough, you sense that this kind of stability no longer nourishes you the way it once did. It keeps you standing still, while something inside you has already begun to shift. Choosing what fits now doesn't mean making a dramatic move. There's no need to change everything, no need to turn your life upside down. Sometimes it's a very small choice, a boundary quietly reset, a yes gently withdrawn, a decision not to keep extending what no longer feels true for you. These small choices rarely draw attention. They don't create strong reactions from the outside, but they change the way you move forward from within. Libra begins to understand that choosing what fits is not a betrayal of what you once valued. It's a natural adjustment when you're no longer standing at the same starting point. There were paths that were right when you needed to learn harmony, and there are new paths that appear when you need to learn deeper self-respect. This doesn't turn you into someone else. It simply shows that you're living closer to your true nature. Libra has long been used to explaining so others understand, explaining to keep the atmosphere smooth. But at this stage, you begin to feel that not every choice needs to be explained. Not every decision requires outside agreement. You only need to understand why you chose this path, what has shifted inside you, where your limits now stand. That is enough. Relief doesn't come from immediate recognition by others. It comes from the feeling that you no longer have to convince yourself each day that you're moving in the right direction. Choosing what fits doesn't make the road smoother, but it makes every step more meaningful. You're no longer walking just to preserve surface-level balance. You're walking with respect for your emotions, your values, and your own rhythm of life. Libra understands that true harmony is not found in avoiding conflict at all costs. It lives in the ability to choose honestly, even when that choice doesn't feel familiar. And from there, a new steadiness begins to form. Nothing to display, nothing to prove, just the quiet sense that you are no longer moving against yourself. What fits is not here to make life easier right away. It's here to help you live more truthfully with the person you are becoming. And for Libra, that kind of alignment runs deeper than any outward form of stability. The crossroads now sits behind you, no longer a place of hesitation, but a marker showing that you've begun choosing from a different place, a place no longer guided by fear of losing balance, but by respect for yourself. After a choice is made from a very honest place within, Libra doesn't see change happen right away. Life doesn't turn overnight. The daily rhythm continues. Familiar responsibilities remain. And yet, something has shifted. The change doesn't arrive as a dramatic moment. It appears quietly, almost just enough for you to notice. You wake up one morning and your breath feels deeper. A small decision is made without the long inner debate it once required. You begin to notice that you're no longer forcing yourself to accept what leaves your heart feeling heavy. Not because you've grown tougher, but because you've grown clearer about what you need. The decisions that follow carry a different quality. There's no dragging sense, no constant weighing just to make things look reasonable in someone else's eyes. Libra begins to feel relief rising from within, not because everything has been resolved, but because you're no longer moving against your own inner knowing. Relationships start to reflect this shift in very subtle ways. Not everyone notices right away, but you do. You find yourself more present in conversations, no longer choosing words just to keep things pleasant, no longer reshaping your emotions to match someone else's expectations. Your honesty begins to be met with honesty from the right people, not because you ask for it, but because the energy you carry has changed. When a choice comes from self-understanding, there's no need to push life forward. Opportunities, encounters, and small movements in everyday life find their own place. Libra comes to understand that the right timing cannot be forced. It forms when something inside you is ready, when you stop seeking constant validation from the outside world. This shift doesn't make every day easier, but it does make you steadier when facing what's still unclear. You begin to trust your own rhythm, not to separate yourself from the world, but to move within it with respect for your emotions and personal values. There are moments when you realize you're no longer reacting from old habits. A refusal is spoken calmly. A choice is held without the need for long explanations. Not because you don't care, but because you've learned how to care without abandoning yourself. Libra understands that this new balance doesn't come from keeping everything perfectly safe. It comes from the ability to adjust, to listen, and to act from a place of honesty. Every step taken after that choice carries a different feeling, not total certainty, but a sense that you can trust yourself, even when the path ahead has yet to fully appear. And along the way, you also learn patience with yourself. No pushing, no comparison, just allowing things to move at a pace that fits the person you are becoming. This change doesn't need a name. It doesn't need wide recognition. It exists clearly enough for you to know that you're moving in a different direction. One where every decision, no matter how small, comes from a deeper understanding of who you are. For Libra, this is a very subtle kind of freedom. Nothing on display, nothing to prove. Just the feeling that you're living more in alignment with yourself and allowing the rest of life to arrange itself in its own way. Looking back on the journey so far, Libra begins to realize that you haven't fallen behind at all. The rhythm has simply changed. You're no longer pulled by the feeling that you have to keep up with someone else. You no longer ask yourself whether you're late by familiar standards. Instead, there is a clearer presence in each step you take, even when that step shows little on the surface. This quiet crossroads didn't appear to hold you back. It appeared to give you time, a rare kind of time, where you can choose without rushing to answer the world. Libra understands that being given time is not a privilege for a few. It's the result of listening deeply enough to recognize what is shifting within you. At this stage, you no longer choose based on the image of who you once thought you had to become. You no longer chase patterns that were once labeled balanced, reasonable, admirable. You choose from a very real sense of who you are becoming, day by day, experience by experience. That choice doesn't look like a major decision. It shows up in how you reorder your priorities, in how you give your energy to what truly matters, in allowing yourself to move more slowly so you can move more steadily. Libra begins to see that steadiness doesn't come from controlling every outcome. It comes from staying with your choice, even when the path ahead is not fully clear. You start trusting an intuition shaped by years of weighing, adjusting, and understanding. Not impulsive instinct, but intuition formed through honesty with your emotions, your values, and your limits. There are days when things don't feel fully settled, and that no longer unsettles you the way it once did. You understand that stability is not a fixed state. It's the ability to adjust as life changes. Your steps now carry a different quality. No need to be fast, no need to be noticed, just steady enough that you don't have to turn back because you've left yourself behind. Libra no longer seeks constant validation from the outside world. Not because you don't value connection, but because you've built a stronger relationship with yourself. And from that relationship, you step into the world with a different energy, lighter, clearer, more genuine. If you're listening to this and recognize that you too are standing at a quiet crossroads, allow yourself to look back on the road you've traveled with respect. Every choice you made had its reason. Every hesitation carried a lesson. You don't need to become a more perfect version to move forward. You only need to become a more honest one. And when you choose what fits the person you are becoming, life doesn't need to change suddenly to prove it. The shift unfolds in its own rhythm, slow enough to be felt, deep enough to make a difference. Libra's journey doesn't end here. It moves into another chapter, one where you continue walking, not in search of balance outside yourself, but in care of the alignment within. And from that place, each step that follows, even in quiet, carries the steadiness you have built for yourself.